Welcome to another AutoRecords training video from Team IM. In this video, we'll be showing you how to configure AutoRecords to delete invoice documents after 7 years. As with all the sample configuration videos, we assume you're already familiar with mFiles and AutoRecords, so we'll be focusing on why the system is configured this way to achieve our goal of deleting the invoices after 7 years. The details for this configuration can also be found in our online documentation at the URL shown here. With the power and flexibility of mFiles, there are many ways that an invoice can be configured. For our example, we'll assume that invoices belong to the financial document class and are separated from other financial documents through the use of a document type property. The document type property has been added to the financial document class. So now let's look at how we configure AutoRecords to delete invoices 7 years after they're created. With all AutoRecords configurations, we start with the policy. The policy name can be anything, and in this case, we've called it Financial Documents-Invoices. We found that naming policies based on the documents they contain rather than the type of retention to be applied provides most clients with an intuitive naming convention. We'll come back to the retention category in a minute. For the class, we're going to specify the financial document class. As you'll recall, there were many types of documents within the financial class, so we'll need to refine our policy with a trigger. Think of a trigger as a filter. Only documents that meet the criteria will be triggered to get this policy assigned. In this case, we'll create a property trigger that looks at the document type. The trigger name gets automatically assigned based on how we configure the trigger. We select the property to be document type and set the comparison to be equal to, and then type in the trigger value of invoice. The value typed in here gets used in the trigger name. Importantly, since the document type is a single select list and not a text field, we have one more step. For drop-down lists, behind the scenes, mFiles assigns IDs to each value in the list. To ensure we get the right ID for our invoice values stored in the document type drop-down list, we will add the document type property to the metadata card and select invoice. With the trigger set, we have told the policy to include financial documents, but only those whose document type is equal to invoice. Now let's look at the retention category. The policy will assign a single retention category to each document that meets the criteria of the policy. In this case, financial documents that are invoices. The retention category determines the retention event or events to be scheduled for the qualifying documents. In this case, we will only schedule a single event to delete the invoice 7 years after it was created. Looking closer at the retention category, the ID is a required numeric field. It can be any number, and some people like to use numbers to separate types of retention, such as retention for physical records versus electronic records. The label is a free-form text field, and it should be used to describe the type of retention. In cases where only a single retention event will be scheduled, it's best to make the label match the name of the event template. The other fields aren't required for this configuration, so let's focus on the event template that we will use. The event group template is our last major configuration. Event group templates follow a pattern of after some event, wait some period of time, and then do some action. Starting with the trigger, since we're going to keep invoices 7 years after they're created, we'll need a date trigger for the created date. For a date trigger, we only need to tell the trigger which date property to use. Anytime the date in that property is less than or equal to the current date, the trigger will be valid. When we use the created date in a trigger, we're effectively saying that the trigger should be valid immediately because the created date will always be less than or equal to the current date. The period is simply a measure of time, and creating the new period, you specify the period time unit and a number of years. Finally, when we're simply deleting documents, the most efficient way to do this is to use a direct action, which will perform the action directly against the file rather than invoking workflows which can be customized. Once we've selected direct actions, we can select the delete and destroy, and our event group template is complete. Now, after the document is created, we wait 7 years, and then we delete and destroy the document. With these configurations in place, we've got everything set up in mFiles to delete invoices 7 years after the creation date. When we look at these configurations in the mFiles 360-degree view, we can see each of the configuration objects and how they relate to each other. The policy has a retention category and a trigger. The retention category has an event template which has a period and a trigger. As we run auto records, documents will be assigned to the policy and retention category, and events will be scheduled. Documentation for this configuration can be found at this URL. For more information, or if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to us at www.teamim.com.